It all started in early July 2025. Yes, last month, when some sexually explicit videos and photos leaked online. These were 5 to 10-minute videos of sexual encounters filmed in a modest apartment in Nanjing, China. The camera angle was the same, the person was wearing the same clothes, and different men entered the room. And the beginning, middle, and end of the videos were always the same. A man comes in, takes off his clothes, they have sex, and he leaves. But there were so many videos and so many men, therefore it didn't take long for someone to recognize those men. But what was the truth behind this incident, and who was this person whose house so many men had come to? The incident made headlines first in China, then around the world. The Nanjing police, led by Khalil L., began searching for the perpetrator of the scandal. A few days later, on July 5th, 2025, in a raid, the strange-looking person from the videos was apprehended. The arrested individual was identified as a 38-year-old man named Joe. A search of her small rented apartment in Nanjing uncovered a large collection of women's wigs, makeup, prosthetic breasts, 6 cell phones, and a notebook containing the names of hundreds of men. Authorities also found numerous video recordings clearly showing the faces and intimate images of the men involved. Known by the alias Sister Hong, she lived a normal male life during the day, but presented herself as a completely different person online at night. Later, she decided to use this persona in real life as well. Every morning, Joe would wake up at 5 a.m., apply excessive makeup, dress in women's clothing, and wear a wig to embody the character of Hong Chi. This persona portrayed a gentle, kind, and domestic middle-aged woman. In short videos she posted on social media, she showed herself cooking, gardening, and doing laundry, everyday activities with the warmth of a homemaker. Naturally, she used extensive filters and voice-altering software to alter her masculine facial features and voice, thus convincingly presenting herself as a widow. Hong Chio, who presented herself as a lonely woman seeking love, was able to easily connect with young and single men online. She usually found her friends or victims through social media and dating apps. Initially, she would gain their trust through innocent conversations, sometimes even sharing their problems and forming emotional bonds. She presented herself to the men as a lonely, middle-aged woman seeking affection. After a while, she would invite them to her home with the promise of free sexual encounters. Well, the free part was a bit funny and a bit wrong, actually. Also, this offer sounded suspicious to almost everyone. When a middle-aged woman, who looked relatively attractive on camera, promised a free encounter, people naturally wondered, but it wasn't entirely free. Our dear woman was very generous, but poor. That's how the scenario was. Therefore, she didn't ask for money from the men she invited to her home. However, she would ask them to bring a small gift. For some reason, these requests were really small. In her broadcasts or chats, she would say, "I don't need money. Just bring a bottle of cooking oil or some fruit to have at home," she'd say, making the meeting excuse seem completely natural. Perhaps the reason for the small requests was that the men, upon arriving, would think, "Oh, well, we brought some watermelon, what's the big deal?" And indeed, the things the guests brought to each meeting were more like a visit to the sick. A few tropical fruits, fish, milk, yogurt, watermelon, and so on. In this way, Sister Hong managed to arrange the meetings without arousing suspicion of prostitution. Furthermore, John had developed some clever routines during this 3-year hunt. Every day, he noted his appointments on his digital calendar, scheduling his victims with a strict timetable, never allowing 2 men to meet at his house at the same time. When the meeting day arrived, Hong, embodying her persona, would greet her guests at her door with a smile. Although he didn't remove his mask until they were actually doing their jobs, he greeted them with a smile, let's say, taking the oil, fruit, and vegetables they brought, setting them aside, and quickly began to get intimate. And when I say quickly, I really mean quickly. He didn't give them a chance to think about what was happening. Suddenly, or rather, I don't know how to describe this in the least obscene way, before the men could even say, "Should we leave the socks on, ma'am?" The chase had begun. Of course, the hidden cameras he had placed in the house beforehand were recording all of this. Joe had made sure that the videos were of high quality so that his victims' faces were visible, because his real plan was quite different. This setup was so clever that most of the victims wouldn't notice anything unusual during the encounter. Up to a point, the man in the role of Sister Hong initiated the relationship while maintaining his role with soft mannerisms and feminine gestures. He mostly kept himself in a passive position, giving the man the feeling of a normal experience. He never took off his shirt, sometimes even greeting his guests in his coat. And he did that job in his coat too. Thus, everyone achieved their goal before the men even realized what was happening. He had everyone in his portfolio, literally everyone. Poor, rich, unemployed, statesmen, teachers, social media influencers. He didn't turn anyone away. Therefore, when the incident came to light, it created a wave of astonishment in the public, wondering how so many attractive or successful men could fall for such a game. After all, there was no money trap, blackmail, or classic fraud involved. On the contrary, these men went there simply out of curiosity and the promise of free sex. The moments of realization experienced by the victims were one of the most interesting aspects of the incident. Some of the men left the house without realizing that their partner was a man from beginning to end. Others, with some effort, realized that something was wrong during or just before the encounter. On one occasion, one of the men who came openly asked if she was a woman or a man. Hong, in her thin voice, she rarely spoke at these meetings, of course, said she was a woman. When the man insisted on proof and tried to touch her, the police intervened, and Hong threatened him with the police, at which point the man stopped. But more importantly, even though the curious man couldn't prove whether she was a woman or a man, he didn't leave. Yes, you heard right. Despite his very valid suspicions, he thought, "Since I've come this far," and continued with the encounter. In fact, when this incident later came to light in the Chinese media, the phrase, "since we've come this far," became significant, and many people started saying, "since we've come," to reluctant encounters. But on a different date, after the encounter, another man realized she was a man. This time, when he threatened to report Hong to the police, the tables turned, and Hong tried to calm the man down, even giving him money. The man calmed down upon seeing the money and unfortunately left. My dear fellow men, these are the moments when you lose your ability to think. Honor, ethics, morality, none of that mattered at these moments. But it wasn't just 1 to 100 or 200. Sister Hong would be with over 1,600 men in that 3-year period. This wasn't the number of men she spoke to, but the number of men who entered her house, whose videos and photos were taken. It was the number of idiots who came with their oil, flour, and honey. Some left the house out of shame, some out of anger, and some completely bewildered, perhaps feeling as bad as if they had been abused. For many, having sex with a man, even unwillingly, was a serious trauma. Though it was their own fault that they didn't understand, that's another matter. But on the other hand, the most surprising group were those who didn't even bat an eyelid when they learned the truth. These people accepted the situation, thinking, "We're here anyway, let's not make a fuss," and continued the relationship. Some even went so far as to become regulars at Sister Hong's house. Yes, a few men had become regulars at this bizarre experience provided by Hong Xihan. The Chinese press would mockingly describe these individuals as returning customers. But the most striking detail came after 3 years. Sister Hong had taken over 1,600 men into her home, slept with them, and secretly recorded each of them. Not just 1 or 2, but 1,600 men. And consequently, these men had normal lives, acquaintances, and many even had wives. Therefore, in Nanjing, a city with a population of approximately 10 million, the acquaintances of over 1,600 faces were revealed, and a drama began when the videos leaked. A veritable record of betrayals circulated on the internet. Female users began identifying their husbands or boyfriends in these videos. Just as we check the list of fake mountain skewers published by the ministry to see if the local butcher is on it, women in Nanjing unfortunately began searching for their husbands in these videos that had spread online. One woman searching for her husband found her brother-in-law. Another encountered her teacher or principal. Imagine, there were so many faces to look at that people fearfully spent hours searching for acquaintances on the list. In this situation, many women, faced with undeniable evidence, decided to end their relationships. There was one case in particular, known online as the handsome boy in the leather jacket, which became a cautionary tale. This young man, frequently seen in Sister Hong's videos, appeared to be quite handsome and charismatic. But when the story surfaced online, detectives quickly discovered he was actually engaged and in a 3-year relationship. It was truly a tragicomic event, yes. But on the other hand, dozens of families were devastated. The women weren't just experiencing the shock and sadness of being cheated on, they were also grappling with the consequences of their betrayal. This situation hadn't just affected families. Imagine your child's teacher was there, and so was your neighborhood butcher. Dozens of businesses were impacted. The scandals spread like wildfire, touching everywhere. And the teacher wasn't just an example. He was real. Parents were shocked when the incident came to light. It sparked debate on many issues, from the school's credibility to the possibility of a respected educator having such a secret life. The school administration remained silent on the allegations. An investigation was launched against the teacher, and he disappeared. Some were identified by their faces, others by their shoes, and still others by tattoos. Even if those exposed deleted a video from the internet, it was reposted repeatedly elsewhere the same day. Therefore, the only solution was to close their social media accounts and disappear. But on the other hand, some didn't deny what happened, even going live and saying, "Yes, I'm one of the men in those videos." And this was a different way to become famous, and there's no such thing as bad publicity. Because people sometimes exaggerated their sensitivity, some even started saying, "Kudos to him. He's an honest man. He spoke openly." In other words, anything was possible on social media. But how had this really happened? How had so many men fallen for this person whose name I don't even know? The fact that dozens of handsome, young, and strong men were deceived by an old man with red lipstick was certainly something to consider. The general consensus was that this incident touched upon many taboos and that the old man skillfully targeted the victim's weaknesses. Firstly, Sister Hong's victims were generally young men who had succumbed to the desire for easy sex. While sexuality is still largely suppressed in Chinese society, for some young men, this situation had turned into a "don't miss the opportunity" mentality. From a psychological perspective, the promise of a free and effortless relationship particularly aroused curiosity in inexperienced or sexually unsatisfied men. Moreover, the person offering this promise wasn't a model difficult to reach in real life. On the contrary, she presented herself as an ordinary middle-aged woman, which made the trap believable for men who lacked self-confidence or who thought they couldn't normally have a sexual or normal relationship with a woman. On the other hand, for those who appeared confident, wealthy, or physically fit, the issue stemmed from their inner world. While these individuals might look attractive on the outside, they can be shy or repressed when it comes to sexual experiences. Therefore, what Hong Chen offered them seemed like an opportunity to break taboos with an effortless new experience. Indeed, the dialogues that ensued supported this. Some, even after learning the truth, chose to continue out of curiosity or to avoid ruining their fantasies. Furthermore, the tendency to continue, even if wrong, to avoid wasting an investment, a phenomenon known as Sankos, was clearly evident in this case. Even after spending time and effort preparing gifts for the meeting, some victims, upon encountering an unexpected scene, accepted the situation, thinking, "I've come this far, I shouldn't leave empty-handed." This was certainly not rational. However, when sexual urges and feelings of shame intertwined, the result was a desperate attempt. But again, it was clear that the issue wasn't just about making money. The risks and effort involved in the actions couldn't be explained solely by money. Living dressed as a woman every day for 3 years, Having sexual relations with hundreds of strangers and constantly risking being caught, all for a sum of money, wasn't very believable. Experts suspected that his actions might also be driven by a desire for sexual gratification or a sense of power. It seemed impossible in real life for him to be with a doctor, a political figure, or muscular, powerful men. But through his methods, he managed to achieve this feeling and brought those men to him. He controlled them one by one, even demonstrating his dominance during the encounters, thus satisfying himself. In short, there was an ego at play, as if he had brought all those educated, muscular men to their knees. But the system had come to an end. Immediately after the scandal came to light, the Chinese police deepened their investigation. And as I mentioned, after arresting Gio in a raid on July 5th and seizing all his digital materials, they quickly prepared a preliminary report. As I stated, the person who did all this was a man named Gio Soy, and according to estimates, the number of people involved was close to 1,700. While the specific addresses are not yet known, the recordings were sold in parts for $35,000. More importantly, and this is also unclear, the uncle allegedly did not allow protection for the men who came. In other words, all the men who came contracted the disease. According to claims, 80% of those contacted had sexually transmitted diseases. If this is proven, Gio's crime will be taken to a completely different level. Because the incident is very recent, the crime and verdict are not yet clear, but the main accusation against the man is the production and distribution of obscene material and secretly filming people in that direction. He is under arrest, and his statements are still being taken. Of course, as new cases emerge, new allegations are also made. That's how the Sisterong incident, which made headlines around the world last month, unfolded. The matter is still very recent. The information is not clear, but at least it looks like what I've described to you. Approximately 1,700 men somehow managed to get through that door.